My brother demanded I give him my inheritance because he was the only man in the family. My brother Vince was 3 years older than me and had been telling me I was less than him since we were children. He said boys were smarter than girls. He said boys were stronger than girls. He said boys would always be more important than girls, and I should just accept my place in the world. Our parents never corrected him. Our father thought it was funny. Our mother said Vince was just being a boy, and I should not take it personally. I took it personally every single time. Growing up, Vince got everything he wanted. He got the bigger bedroom. He got the newer bicycle. He got the car when he turned 16 while I had to wait until I could buy my own at 19. Our parents said Vince needed these things because he was going to be the head of his own household someday. They said I would just marry someone who would provide for me, so I did not need as much. I learned early that arguing was pointless. I just worked harder. I got a job at 15 and saved every penny. I got scholarships to pay for college because our parents said they could only afford to help one child, and Vince needed it more. I graduated with honors and got a good job in accounting while Vince dropped out after 2 years and bounced between dead-end positions. None of that mattered to our parents. Vince was still the golden child because Vince was the son. Our grandmother was different. Grandma Faye was our mother's mother, and she had opinions about how her daughter raised us. She told our mother that favoring Vince would ruin him. She told our mother that I deserved the same opportunities as my brother. She told our mother that the world was changing and women did not need men to take care of them anymore. Our mother ignored her. Grandma Faye did not ignore me. She called me every Sunday to ask about my life. She came to my college graduation even though our parents said it was too far to drive. She visited my first apartment and told me she was proud of the woman I had become. She said I reminded her of herself when she was young. She said she wished she had someone in her corner back then, the way she wanted to be in mine. When Grandma Faye got sick 2 years ago, I drove 4 hours every weekend to help take care of her. I cooked her meals and cleaned her house and sat with her while she watched her favorite old movies. Vince visited twice in 18 months. Both times he asked Grandma Faye for money. Both times she told him no. She said he needed to learn to stand on his own feet. She said she would not enable his laziness. Grandma Faye passed away on a Wednesday morning in April. I was holding her hand when she took her last breath. Vince showed up late and spent most of the service on his phone. A week later, the lawyer called us for the reading of the will. We all sat in the lawyer's office waiting to hear what Grandma left behind. The lawyer read through the standard parts first. Grandma left some jewelry to our mother. She left some furniture to a cousin who had always admired it. She left a donation to the animal shelter where she used to volunteer. Then the lawyer got to the main assets. Grandma's house was worth about $300,000. Her savings account had another $200,000. She also had a small investment portfolio worth around $150,000. All of it went to me. Every single penny. The house, the savings, the investments, everything Grandma Faye owned was now mine. Vince stared at the lawyer like he misheard. He asked the lawyer to repeat it. The lawyer repeated it. He asked if there was a mistake. The lawyer said there was no mistake. He asked why he was not included. The lawyer said Grandma Faye left specific instructions. She said Vince would receive exactly what he earned through his relationship with her. She said that the amount was $0. Vince exploded. He shot forward across Nathan Powell's desk, both hands slamming down on the polished wood surface hard enough to make the pen holder rattle. I need to see that document myself. Nathan slid the will across the desk without changing his expression, his movements calm and measured like he dealt with angry people every day. Vince grabbed the papers and started reading, his finger tracing each line while his mouth moved silently. My mother made a choking sound beside me, and then the crying started. Quiet at first, but getting louder with each breath. My father's face went from normal to pink to deep red in the span of maybe 10 seconds, the color spreading up from his collar to his forehead. I could not move. My hands gripped the arms of my chair, and I just sat there watching my family fall apart over words on paper that Grandma Faye had written months ago. Vince finished reading and started over from the beginning. His hands shook enough that the papers rustled. My mother kept crying and my father kept getting redder, and Nathan just sat there behind his desk with his hands folded, waiting. The office felt too small suddenly, like the walls were closer than they had been 5 minutes ago. The air conditioning hummed, but I felt hot anyway. Vince read the will a third time before he looked up at me. You manipulated her. His voice came out rough and accusing. You spent all that time with her and you poisoned her mind against me. My father jumped in before I could respond. There is no way Mom would do this unless someone convinced her to. You must have told her lies about Vince. You must have made her think he did not care about her. Nathan cleared his throat and both of them turned to look at him. Mrs. Faye was mentally sound and fully capable of making her own decisions. I met with her multiple times over the past year to discuss her estate planning. She was very clear about her wishes and her reasoning. Vince slammed the papers down on the desk. What reasoning? What possible reason could she have? Nathan picked up the will and found a specific page. She stated that you would receive exactly what you earned through your relationship with her. She documented every interaction she had with you for the past 3 years, including the 2 times you visited and asked for money. My father opened his mouth and closed it again. My mother's crying got quieter but did not stop. She begged me from her chair, reaching across to grab my arm. You have to do the right thing here. We are family, and family takes care of each other. You cannot just keep everything when Vince needs help too. The words hit me wrong because I remembered being 7 years old and asking why Vince got a new bike when mine was broken and being told that boys needed things more than girls did. I remembered being 16 and asking why Vince got a car and being told I would marry someone who would buy me one. I remembered being 19 and asking for help with college and being told they could only afford to help one child, and Vince needed it more. Family takes care of each other. I stood up from my chair and picked up my purse. I need time to process this. My mother started to say something else, but I was already walking toward the door. Vince shouted after me that I was a selfish bitch who stole his birthright. I kept walking. Nathan called my name, but I did not stop until I was in the hallway with the door closed behind me. The drive back to my apartment took 4 hours, and I do not remember most of it. My phone started buzzing before I even got out of the parking lot. I glanced at it at a red light and saw my mother's name, then my father's name, then my mother again. I put the phone in the cup holder and turned the radio up loud enough to drown out the buzzing. The highway stretched out in front of me and I just drove, my hands tight on the steering wheel and my mind blank. When I finally pulled into my parking spot at my apartment building, I checked my phone. 23 missed calls. 15 from my mother, 6 from my father, 2 from Vince. I had 1 voicemail. I sat in my car in the dark parking lot and played it. Vince's voice came through angry but trying to sound reasonable. We need to talk about fixing this situation before it tears the family apart. I want to work this out like adults. Call me back. I deleted the voicemail and got out of the car. He was blaming me for family problems like I was the one who spent 30 years telling him he was better than me because he was born male. Inside my apartment, I dropped my purse on the counter and stood in the kitchen with my hands shaking. The anger hit me all at once, hot and overwhelming. I grabbed my phone and called Natalia. She answered on the second ring and I asked if she could come over. She showed up 40 minutes later with 2 bottles of wine and did not ask any questions until we were sitting on my couch with full glasses. I told her everything from the beginning. Grandma Faye's death, the will reading, the inheritance, Vince's explosion, my parents' reactions, the drive home, the 23 missed calls. Natalia listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she took a long drink of wine. Then she asked me one question. What would your grandmother want you to do with this gift she gave you? I opened my mouth to answer and then closed it again. Grandma Faye had not just left me money. She had left me proof that I mattered. She had left me validation that I was worthy and loved. She had left me a message that said I deserved good things regardless of what my parents thought. I called Nathan Powell first thing the next morning from my kitchen table with coffee getting cold in front of me. He picked up on the 3rd ring and I asked him about next steps for managing the inheritance. I also asked if Vince could legally challenge the will. Nathan explained that anyone could file a challenge, but Grandma Faye's will was ironclad. She had documentation of her mental capacity from her doctor. She had written statements explaining her reasoning. She had met with him multiple times over a year to make sure everything was clear and legal. The challenge would fail, but it might take time and cause stress. He recommended I talk to a financial advisor soon to understand the tax implications and investment options. He gave me a name and number for someone he trusted. I wrote it down on a napkin because I could not find paper. My mother called while I was getting ready for work. I almost did not answer, but I knew she would just keep calling. Her voice came through the phone thick with tears. You are destroying this family. You are breaking my heart by being greedy when your brother needs help. I held the phone away from my ear for a second and took a breath. Then I asked her what Vince needed help with. She said he was $30,000 in credit card debt and had been counting on inheritance money to get back on his feet. I felt something twist in my chest that might have been sympathy, except I remembered Grandma Faye refusing to give Vince money twice. She had said enabling his irresponsibility was not helping him. She had said he needed to learn to stand on his own feet. My mother kept talking about family and responsibility and doing the right thing, but I was not really listening anymore. My father called that evening with a different approach. His voice had that stern quality he used when he wanted me to know he was serious. He said that as the man of the family, Vince had responsibilities and expenses I did not understand as a single woman. He said the house should go to Vince because he would need it when he got married and started a family. He said I would just marry someone who would provide for me anyway, so I did not need it. I sat on my couch listening to him explain why my brother deserved my inheritance, and something clicked into place in my head. My father still thought this way after I had been financially independent for years. He still thought this way after Vince dropped out of college and bounced between jobs. He still thought this way after I graduated with honors and built a career. He would never see me as equal to Vince. Not ever. Charlotte Broderick's office was downtown in a building with marble floors and too much glass. She met me in the lobby and shook my hand with a firm grip. Her office had windows overlooking the city, and she offered me coffee before we sat down. She walked me through exactly what I had inherited. The house needed some repairs to the roof and the plumbing, but nothing major. The investments were solid, mostly index funds and bonds that Grandma had been adding to for decades. They needed some rebalancing to be more appropriate for someone my age. The tax implications were significant, but manageable with proper planning. Charlotte spread papers across her desk and explained everything in language I could understand. She treated me like a capable adult making important financial decisions. She did not talk down to me or suggest I wait for a man to help me figure it out. After a lifetime of my parents treating me like I could not handle money, sitting in Charlotte's office felt revolutionary. Vince showed up at my apartment on Saturday morning without calling first. I was still in my pajamas drinking coffee when someone knocked on my door hard enough to make me jump. I looked through the peephole and saw him standing in the hallway. He had driven 4 hours to talk to me. His face looked calm, almost pleasant, which meant he had switched tactics. I opened the door but left it wide open, unwilling to be alone with him given how he exploded at Nathan's office. He smiled at me and asked if he could come in. I stepped back and gestured to the couch, but I did not close the door. Vince sat down on my couch and ran his hands through his hair. He looked tired and older than his 30 years. He started talking about the lawyer's office and how he lost control. He said he was sorry for yelling and making a scene. He said he was shocked because he always thought Grandma loved both of us the same amount. His voice stayed calm and reasonable, like he practiced what to say on the drive over. He said he understood why I was upset, but we needed to think about this situation like adults. He said families should stick together and not let money come between them. He suggested we sell the house and split everything 50-50, because that was what fair siblings would do. He said Grandma probably did not think about how her will would cause problems between us. He said we could fix this ourselves without lawyers or court battles. I sat in the chair across from him and felt something cold settle in my chest. I asked him if he thought fair parents would have treated us equally growing up. His face went blank for a second. He said that was different. I asked him how it was different. He shifted on the couch and said our parents did the best they could with what they had. He said they had to make choices about where to put their resources. I reminded him that those resources went to him while I worked at 15 to buy my own things. He waved his hand like I was bringing up old history that did not matter anymore. He said we were talking about now, not the past. He said I needed to stop holding grudges and be mature about this situation. I felt my jaw tighten. I told him I was not making any decisions about the inheritance right now. I said I needed time to process everything and figure out what I wanted to do. His calm mask started to crack. He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. He said I was being difficult on purpose. He said I got scholarships for college, so I did not need help back then. He said he struggled and deserved support from the family. I stared at him and felt something like amazement at how he could twist reality. He struggled through 2 years of college he barely attended while partying. I worked full-time and maintained honors classes for 4 years. He thought those things were equal. He thought his choice to drop out meant he deserved money more than I did. I stood up and told him he needed to leave my apartment. His face turned red. He stood up fast enough that the couch moved backward. He said I was going to regret this. He said I was choosing money over family. He said Mom and Dad would never forgive me for this betrayal. He walked to the door and grabbed the handle. He turned back and said his lawyer would be in touch about contesting the will. Then he left and slammed the door hard enough to make the wall shake. I locked the door and leaned against it. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. I was angry at him for thinking I would just hand over Grandma's gift because he showed up and asked nicely. I was angry at myself for the small part of me that felt guilty for saying no. I spent the rest of the weekend going through the documents Nathan gave me. There were bank statements and property deeds and investment portfolios. There were tax documents and insurance policies. Everything was organized in folders with labels in Grandma's neat handwriting. At the bottom of the stack, I found a sealed envelope with my name on it. I recognized Grandma's handwriting immediately. My hands shook as I opened it. The letter was 3 pages long on her good stationery. She started by saying she loved me and she was sorry she would not be there to see me read this. She said she watched my parents favor Vince our entire lives. She said it broke her heart to see me work. So hard for scraps of approval I never got. She said she tried to talk to my mother about the favoritism, but my mother would not listen. She said she knew I felt less than because of how my parents treated me. She said this inheritance was her way of telling me I was always worthy. She said I was always loved. She said I always deserved good things no matter what my parents thought about my gender. I sat on my couch and cried for an hour. I cried for Grandma and for the childhood I deserved but never had. I cried for the little girl who worked at 15 because her parents would not buy her a car. I cried for the college student who took out loans while her brother got family money. I kept reading through my tears. Grandma wrote that she hoped this money would give me freedom to build the life I wanted. She said I should not wait for a man to provide it for me. She said she was proud of the strong woman I became despite my parents. She said their limitations were not my fault. Her words felt like a hug from beyond the grave. They gave me strength to face what I knew was coming from my family. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. I would keep it forever. On Monday, I took a personal day from work. I drove 4 hours to Grandma's house with the keys Nathan gave me. The house looked the same as it always had. White siding with blue shutters and a garden full of roses in the front yard. I parked in the driveway and sat in my car for a minute. An older woman came out of the house next door. She was small with white hair and she carried a plate covered in foil. She walked over to my car and I rolled down the window. She said her name was Mrs. Sisson, and she lived next door to Grandma for 20 years. She said she was glad Grandma left everything to me. She said I was the only one who visited and cared about her. She handed me the plate and said she made cookies. She said Grandma talked about me all the time. She said Vince came by twice in the past year asking Grandma for money. She said both times he left angry when Grandma said no. Mrs. Sisson patted my arm and said Grandma made the right choice. Then she went back to her house and I went inside. The house smelled like Grandma's lavender soap and old books. Everything was neat and clean the way she always kept it. I walked through the living room and kitchen and felt her presence everywhere. I started going through her desk in the spare bedroom. I found bills and receipts and old photos. I found a leather journal with her name on the cover. I opened it and saw dates from 5 years ago. She wrote about our family. She wrote about calling my mother to talk about the favoritism. She wrote about my mother making excuses for why Vince got more. She wrote about refusing to give Vince money when he asked. She wrote about me visiting every weekend when she got sick. She wrote about being proud of my job and my apartment and my life. Reading her words felt like proof that I was not crazy. Everything I felt about my family was real. She saw it too. She documented it in her own handwriting. I kept reading and found more entries about Vince. She wrote about him asking for $15,000 for gambling debts. She wrote about telling him to get help. She wrote about him getting angry and not visiting for 8 months. She wrote that she would not enable his problems by giving him money. The context made everything make sense. Grandma did not leave him nothing because she was mean. She left him nothing because she loved him enough to not make his problems worse. My phone rang and I saw my mother's name. I answered and she started talking before I could say hello. She asked what I was doing at Grandma's house without telling the family. Her voice was sharp and angry. I said I was the executor and I had the legal right to be here. I said I needed to secure the property and start managing the estate. She said it was disrespectful to go through Grandma's things without Vince there. I reminded her that Vince visited twice in 18 months. She said that did not matter because he was still family. I told her I would call her later and hung up. I kept looking through Grandma's desk. I found more journals going back 15 years. I opened one from when I was in high school. Grandma wrote about my graduation. She wrote about my parents leaving early to go to Vince's college party. She wrote about how I looked sad when I saw them leave. She wrote about being angry at my mother for missing my speech. I turned pages and found entries about my college graduation. She wrote about my parents saying it was too far to drive. She wrote about going by herself and being proud of me. She wrote about every Sunday when I called to tell her about my life. She wrote about my parents barely asking about me when she talked to them. Her documentation of these patterns over years showed me how deep the problem went. It was not just a few incidents. It was a lifetime of my parents choosing Vince over me again and again. Grandma saw it all and wrote it down. She left me proof that I was not imagining things or being too sensitive. She left me validation that what I experienced was real and wrong. I locked the journals back in the desk drawer and left the house. My phone rang 3 days later while I was at work. Charlotte's name showed on the screen. I answered and she got straight to business. She needed my signature on documents to set up accounts and transfer the assets from Grandma's estate into my name. The list was long. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, property deeds, tax forms. She said we should meet Wednesday afternoon at her office to handle everything at once. I agreed and wrote the appointment in my calendar. Charlotte's voice stayed professional but kind. She said I was doing well managing all the administrative tasks, and I should feel proud of handling everything properly. Then she said something that stuck with me. She said I did not owe anyone explanations about my financial decisions. The money was mine legally and ethically, and I had the right to manage it however I wanted. Her words felt like permission to stop defending myself to my family. I thanked her and hung up feeling both overwhelmed and grateful. The next morning, I found a thick envelope in my mailbox addressed to Nathan. The return address showed a law firm I did not recognize. I called Nathan and he told me to bring it to his office unopened. I drove over during my lunch break and handed him the envelope. He opened it and read through the papers inside. His expression stayed neutral, but I saw his jaw tighten. He looked up and told me Vince hired a lawyer named Dominic Fletcher, who was officially challenging the will. The letter claimed I used undue influence over Grandma in her final years to manipulate her into leaving everything to me. It demanded mediation before pursuing litigation. Nathan set the papers down and leaned back in his chair. He said this was a common pressure tactic meant to scare me into settling. The challenge had no merit given all the documentation of Grandma's mental capacity and her clear written explanations of her reasoning. He told me not to engage directly with Vince or Dominic Fletcher. All communication would go through him from now on. I nodded and felt my stomach twist with anxiety about what came next. That evening, my phone rang and both my parents' names showed on the screen. I answered and heard my father's voice first. He was using his serious tone. He said Vince's lawyer told them we could avoid court if I just agreed to split things fairly. My mother's voice joined in from speakerphone. She said legal battles would eat up the inheritance in lawyer fees, and I should be smart and compromise now. I asked them why they never thought I deserved equal treatment growing up. My mother said that was not relevant to the current situation. Her words told me everything about their inability to see their own role in this mess. I told them I was following Grandma's wishes as stated in her legal will. If Vince wanted to waste money on a lawsuit that had no chance of winning, That was his choice. My father's voice got louder. He called me ungrateful and said after everything they did for me, this is how I repay them. I felt anger rise in my chest. I pointed out they paid for Vince's college while I got scholarships. They gave him a car while I bought my own. They put his needs first my entire childhood. I asked what exactly I was supposed to be grateful for. My mother started sobbing. My father said I was not welcome at family events until I fixed this mess I created. The call ended with my mother crying in the background. I sat on my couch staring at my phone. They were blaming me for a situation caused by their lifetime of favoritism and Vince's entitlement. The irony would be funny if it was not so painful. I called Natalia and she came over with takeout. She listened to everything and reminded me that their rejection was about their inability to face their own failures, not about my worth. Her words helped, but the hurt still sat heavy in my chest. On Friday, I met with Sabine Lockhart at her office downtown. Natalia recommended her after I mentioned needing help processing everything. Sabine's office had comfortable chairs and soft lighting. She asked me to tell her what brought me in. I explained the inheritance and the family conflict, and how guilty I felt about having so much while Vince had nothing. Sabine listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said something that shifted my whole perspective. She said I was grieving multiple losses. I was grieving my grandmother. I was grieving the family relationships I thought I had. I was grieving the fantasy that my parents might eventually see me as equal to Vince. She said the inheritance was not just money. It was proof that at least one person in my family saw my true value. Her words made tears run down my face. Nathan called the following Tuesday. Dominic Fletcher filed the official will contest in probate court. The process would take several months to resolve. Nathan assured me the challenge was baseless, but I should prepare for my family to escalate their pressure tactics as they realized legal action would not work quickly. He recommended I document any harassment or threats in case we needed to pursue a restraining order. That seemed extreme until Vince started leaving voicemails. The first one was angry. The second one was angrier. By the fourth one, he was yelling that I stole from him and I would regret it. I saved every message and forwarded them to Nathan. My cousin called that Wednesday. She received Grandma's antique dining table and chairs in the will. She said she wanted to apologize for my parents' behavior and tell me she supported my decision to honor Grandma's wishes. She said she witnessed the favoritism growing up and always felt bad for me. She wished she had said something at the time. Her validation meant more than she knew. She mentioned that several other extended family members thought my parents and Vince were being unreasonable, but they were afraid to speak up. Hearing that I had some family support made me feel less alone. I drove back to Grandma's house on Saturday to continue sorting through her belongings. I found a cardboard box in the hall closet filled with cards and letters. I opened it and saw my handwriting on envelope after envelope. Birthday cards I sent from college. Thank you notes for Christmas gifts. Postcards from trips I took. Letters about my first apartment and my new job. She kept everything. I looked through the whole box and found only 5 items from Vince. All birthday cards. None had personal messages beyond his signature. The physical evidence of our different relationships with her made me feel less guilty about the inheritance. I was putting the box back when I heard the front door open. I walked into the living room and saw Vince standing there. He said he had a right to go through Grandma's things too. I told him he needed to leave since he was not the executor, and the property was legally mine now. He ignored me and walked toward the bedroom. He started opening drawers and grabbing items. He picked up Grandma's gold watch from the dresser. I told him to put it down because Grandma specifically mentioned in her will that the watch should go to me. He shoved it in his pocket and said it belonged to him. I pulled out my phone and called the police non-emergency line. I asked them to send an officer to remove a trespasser from my property. Vince's face turned red and he started yelling that I could not do this to him. The officer held up his hand and Vince stopped mid-sentence. The officer asked me if I was the legal owner of this property. I pulled out the will from my bag and showed him the relevant pages. The officer read through it while his partner kept Vince from moving closer to me. The officer asked if I was the executor. I said yes, and showed him Nathan's business card with a note on the back confirming my role. The officer turned to Vince and told him he needed to leave immediately since this was private property, and he did not have permission to be here. Vince argued that his grandmother's house should belong to the whole family. The officer said the will was clear and he needed to leave now or face trespassing charges. Vince pulled out his phone and said he was calling his lawyer. The officer said that was fine, but he still needed to leave the property while making that call. Vince shoved past me toward the door and yelled that I would regret this. He said he was suing me for emotional distress and I stole his inheritance. The officer followed him outside while I stood in the living room shaking. The second officer stayed with me and asked if I was okay. I nodded, but my hands would not stop trembling. The officer asked if this was the first time Vince showed up uninvited. I said yes, but he had been calling and leaving angry messages. The officer suggested I change the locks right away and consider getting a restraining order if Vince kept showing up. I had not thought about needing a restraining order against my own brother. The officer said family disputes over inheritance could get ugly fast, and it was better to be safe. He gave me his card and said to call if Vince came back. I thanked him and locked the door after both officers left. I sat on the couch for 20 minutes trying to calm down. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan asking if everything was okay. I called him back and explained what happened. He said I did the right thing calling the police and asked me to forward any threatening messages Vince left. He also agreed with the officer about changing the locks. I looked up locksmiths in the area and found one who could come out that afternoon. The locksmith arrived 2 hours later and changed all 3 locks on the house. He also installed a security camera above the front door that connected to an app on my phone. The whole thing cost $400, but I felt safer knowing Vince could not just walk in anymore. Mrs. Sisson from next door came over while the locksmith was working. She asked if everything was all right after seeing the police cars. I explained that my brother showed up without permission and tried to take things that were not his. Mrs. Sisson said she would keep an eye on the property and call me if she saw Vince around again. She gave me her phone number and I gave her mine. She said my grandmother talked about me all the time and she was glad the house went to someone who actually cared. Her words made my throat tight. Mrs. Sisson went back to her house and I finished up with the locksmith. I tested all 3 new locks twice to make sure they worked. The security camera showed a clear view of the front porch and driveway. I felt angry that I had to do this because of my own brother. I also felt something else. I was starting to see patterns in Vince's behavior that I used to excuse. He always got loud when he did not get his way. He always blamed other people for his problems.